If you look up the word meditation in a dictionary, it says the process of using the mind to think. It's embracing the actions and the faculty of the mind to think, to discern, to reflect, to put together a series of feelings and thoughts and sensations and information and come up with some type of a conclusion and an experience. Well, that hadn't been my approach to meditation.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
We're at the end of another year with Dr. Allen Berger, and our amazing producer, Patrick Newman, and we have a very, very special guest today.
God, you and I go back 38 years now, is it?
Actually, it'll be 39 in February.
Look at that. My goodness.
Oh my God, you guys have been together longer than Dee Dee and I have been. It's like we're getting up there, but we're not. Yeah, you guys are longer than us. Yeah,
we're dinosaurs. Sometimes I even feel like one. I mean,
well, a lot of times. Yeah.
But it's just by way of an introduction. Those of you that don't know Herb Kaighan, first of all, he's a dear friend of mine, and has been a fellow traveler, colleague, and an explorer of emotional sobriety now for, I'd say, about 2.5 decades, Herb. We started doing workshops together and up and down California, actually. I mean, we were up in Santa Barbara, San Diego, bunch of workshops in the LA area. And, we've just found that his love and interest in recovery and in the 12 steps and helping people take that journey, and my love and interest in emotional sobriety just created a great pairing, right? And it's just turned into a hell of a collaboration and an inspiration. And you've helped thousands and thousands of people with the steps and carrying this great message of emotional sobriety and helping us deepen our understanding of it. So thank you so much for all you do. And I speak on the behalf of many, many thousands of people who've gotten so much from your work.
Well,
amen.
I thank you so much for the compliments, of course. And everything you said is true. I appreciate that. I have the humility to say thank you. And I fortunately now have the humility to not take credit for it. I take credit for cooperation. That's and having you've used a word currently that has intrigued me. I've had the curiosity. I've had the curiosity. Since I was 11 or 12 years old, I've had some sense of longing, some sense of question, some sense of journey and curiosity. And that took me to a monastery when I was 17 years old. Exploring some type of spiritual dimension as I understood it in a very limited way at 17. Of course, having a mother who is a daily mass goer, Catholic tradition, in the best of senses, very balanced, not a crazy religious addict of any kind, a very balanced and sensible and consistent way of looking at the world and her relationship with God. And she began to teach me about prayer. And I got real interested. I became an altar boy, of course. And then I became president of the altar boys, of course. There's omens going. Only Allen can really appreciate that in terms of my own history and journey. And so in 1964, I left that monastery. 7 years I was there, wearing a black robe, silent for 7 years, being taught about meditation, meditating, and having this wonderful connection to and affinity for the quiet and the camaraderie of the monks in the monastery, and practicing and reading, and as passionate about it as I am. Fortunately, that's built into the system, I guess, about most things. But I left in 1964, and I hung out my black robe in 1964, and I didn't meditate again for another 25 years. Well, what's that? Yeah. Well, that's the person who took a value from the outside and put on a black robe, and when you are a monk, you meditate. Yeah. Well, when you take the black robe off, you're not a monk, so you don't meditate. I mean, I look back on it now and it's that simplistic. Of course, it wasn't at that time, and nor was it clear at all. No, nor was it clear at all. For some reason, I discovered, and it's a story for a different day, that I was an alcoholic. In 1984, I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did all the drill, and I'm not going to go into all of the different aspects of that, but I was a good AA person, meeting, sponsor, book studies, step studies, all of the drill. Did the 12 steps in my first year. Now I'm not meditating. Somehow I didn't ever really connect with the whole purpose of the 12 steps, which is a spiritual awakening. But because I didn't have really good guidance, I'm not blaming, I'm just explaining. I didn't work the steps in any impactful way. I have a lot of information, and the man who met me in 1988 said that. He said, Herb, you have a lot of information, but you have no transformation. If you're not looking at me, that I just encompassed my head with my hands and then moved my hands to my heart. And he said, you have got a lot of academic knowledge, but very little authentic spiritual human behavior. He said, quite frankly, you think you're a Renaissance man, you're actually a Neanderthal. Now, this is 4 years sober. I'm asking this man for help. I know he's the guy because he's like Allen. I mean, he tells you the truth. He's kind, but he's not one bit interested in your feelings about the truth as he tells it. And so I fell in love with Allen when I first met him. He's a Marine. He pretends to be a psychologist, but he's really a Marine. And he doesn't take any prisoners, but he's kind in the process. But fortunately helped begin my healing process along with the AA and the not drinking. It all works together. But in 1988, this man who confronted me with my delusion about a Renaissance man brought me through the steps out of the big book and came to step 11. Well, I mean, I'm a monk. I mean, I'm a theologian. These are all delusions because I'm certainly not a monk. Poverty, chastity, and obedience were very distant thoughts in my mind and practice. But when he got to step 11 in the big book, he helped me understand it. He said, read it and highlight it, which I did. He said, then outline it. Well, it's really interesting, 2.5 pages, the best description of how to meditate, why to meditate, and the value of meditation that I've ever come across, before or after. But it's not that clear to me when I read it, even though I have the information and I'm reasonably intelligent, fairly well educated. I couldn't unpack it. And I found that with each of the steps. This man who had the clarity seemed to put one of those coal miner's hats on my head with the little light in the front and have each sentence open up, and I could understand what it said, but only in the light of his experience as he journeyed me through each paragraph, each sentence, and each word. And so I'm going to make this really short and simple, and then we can go on from there, because it's the best kept secret in the rooms from a meditation standpoint. It says, we ask God to direct our thinking. If you look up the word meditation in a dictionary, it says the process of using the mind to think. It's embracing the actions and the faculty of the mind to think, to discern, to reflect, to put together a series of feelings and thoughts and sensations and information and come up with some type of a conclusion and an experience. Well, that hadn't been my approach to meditation. I had come up through the monastery, which is contemplation. Then I had shifted into becoming a dilettante Buddhist and studying their way of life, which is contemplation. But it's not meditation. Meditation is the use of the mind to think, and the big book acknowledges that. Bill was trained in the Oxford group about meditation, and the purpose of meditation was to receive guidance. We ask God to direct our thinking, this man said, repeating what the big book says. And he said, it goes like this, Herb. God, please direct my thinking. And I hope you're all laughing because, oh my God, could it be that simple? Yes, it's that simple. Of course, the assumption is about steps 2 and 3 in a God of our understanding, or as I like to say, a God of our not understanding. And I had blown by steps 2 and 3 because I'm a monk, but I blew by steps 2 and 3, and I didn't have any problem with my belief that I believed, even though I was really a practical agnostic. Going back to meditation, we ask God to direct our thinking, then we begin thinking. The big book suggests we think about the 24 hours a day and we consider our plans for the day. I'm quoting. We think about the 24 hours ahead. I translate that as my activity. What am I going to do today? We consider our plans today. I translate that into who am I going to be today? Yesterday I was insensitive. Today I want to be sensitive. Yesterday I was distracted. Today I want to be more mindful. So my answer to that question is a reflection of the character defect du jour from yesterday. I want to be a decent human being, and I want to make ever increasing daily improvements in order to be able to do that. So I reflect on where I'm out of alignment with reality. There's the relationship to emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety, from my standpoint, my interpretation, my Herb's definition, is an authentic relationship with reality as it is. A relationship with reality as it flows, as it manifests in the present moment. And accepting that and adjusting to that. Well, here's what's not in the big book, which was the key that unlocked the door to meditation for me. I'm forever grateful to this man who had no training, but he had an understanding and he had experience and he had a practice. So he was coming both from information and from a practice, from experience. We ask God to direct our thinking. God, please direct my thinking. Then we begin thinking. We consider our plans for the day. Then here's the key. That's not in the big book, but allowed me to have a consistent meditation practice since 1988, every day. The key is we listen to our thinking as the conduit of the message from God. We ask God to direct our thinking, then we trust that what we think is in fact reflective of the message. The medium of the message is my brain, my thinking brain, my emotions, my sensations, anything that I'm conscious of in terms of my imagination and or my memory. And my job is to reflect on all of this data and see if there's sifting through it. Is this the message of God, or is this the message of my ego? Fortunately, I've done a fourth step. So I'm pretty good at discerning, and I've had a lot of therapy, and I was introduced to the 9 characteristics of narcissism, which were very embarrassing because they were so true. I'm not sure Dr. Berger ever said it, but it sure makes a good story. When he gave me this list of the 9 characteristics from the DSM, that's or diagnostic manual of the psychiatrist for personality disorders. He said there's 9 characteristics there. Take a look at that. And I took a look at it. I turned red, I'm sure, because I was embarrassed. And he said the only thing missing, Herb, is your picture. Now, it makes a great story. I'm not sure he ever did that, but it could be that he could have said that.
If he didn't, he missed an opportunity.
Well, I actually had a Polaroid camera. I took a picture. I like how you tied this into emotional sobriety. Let me just take a minute.
It's about consciousness.
No, what I wanted to say is, one of the things that stands out to me about emotional sobriety that we've talked a lot about, and really I think is a key, this alignment to the reality is a big part of it. But the way I'm thinking about it now is we are untethering ourselves. We don't realize the degree to which our life has been determined by a lot of forces that are outside of our awareness.
Yeah.
Things that drive us to behave a certain way, to develop certain kind of self parts, to emphasize certain parts over at the expense of others. I mean, all of these things contribute to us forming, this image of ourselves, right? You were calling it your ego, which I think is a good synonym for the false self, right?
Yes. Oh, exactly.
Right. It's a great sin. So emotional sobriety is getting untethered, which means removing all of these conditions that we've placed on ourselves, on life, on reality, conditions that we believed must occur for us to be okay, for us to feel okay, for us to be able to feel good about life and to feel good about the experience we're having. And what I love about what you're saying about meditation is because the only way to get to that freedom is to become aware of how determined we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And predetermined.
And well, that's part of that determination, isn't it? You're right. Like you said, you got a gene in you that makes you a bald guy, a white bald guy. Me too. I've got that same gene.
Yeah.
But that I can put a Rogaine on my head and I can get plugs put in and all that to struggle, to fight with reality, try to make it what I want it to be. But these things, these forces are there. And the way we get free of, so I really love the way you talked about it is really observing our thinking.
Yes.
Listening to our thinking. What is it telling us? And there's a reason it comes at step 11, isn't there? Like you said early on, there's going to be a lot of confounding or conflation with the false self.
Right.
So it's only as we start to differentiate ourselves and as Bill calls it, strive to have the best possible attitude towards ourselves in life, that we start to get to see the difference between when our ego is talking, right, and then when the best of us is talking. But it's an exciting thing. Herb, tell us about the book that you wrote with Hazelton, because I think it's really an outstanding contribution to this area.
Thank you. The title doesn't really do it justice, I believe, but I didn't have a hand in that because Hazelton was the publisher. Practicing the Here and Now. The subtitle has the word meditation in it. And in discussing it with the editor that was my guardian through the process of writing the book, we said, there's a lot of books on meditation. There's a lot of books on the steps. In fact, I've written some of the books on the steps. What's going to be different about this book? What's going to give it a little bit of this is something worth reading because it's got a unique turn on it? And I said, well, most people don't understand meditation at all. So there needs to be a chapter at the beginning to express what are prayer, what is meditation, what is contemplation, what is mindfulness, what is the various methods of consciousness. And but then maybe taking a look at each of the steps through the lens of meditation, coming to step 1, powerlessness, through the lens of power, coming to step 2 with a brand new lens as to challenging yourself about your preconditions, predetermination, prejudice about God or spirit or higher power or higher self, and use the process of meditation to open the mind, open the heart, to deliver you to an experience that you've never had, to deliver you to a place of knowledge about something and an experience with this consciousness practice that you've not had before. And so that's the tone and the nature of the book, going through each of the steps with the lens of meditation in terms of using that mechanism of the thinking person, but informed, meaning informed by the spirit, so that the combination of the spirit and my own discernment will deliver me to a place I didn't even know exist. You were mentioning about the forces that we connect to that predetermine some of our thoughts, some of our feelings, some of our behavior that we're unconscious of. And my image of that, I love images. I do workshops that helps people kind of put into pictures the words that I'm using, because sometimes the words get a little complex, but it's like a puppet on strings. Now, the point of the fourth step that really helped me is it was my ball of string that I tied to events, that I tied to circumstances, that I tied to people. And I'm like now a puppet connected to a puppeteer, and circumstances and people and events are determining how I behave, how I feel, and what my attitude is. But I'm blaming them because they're holding the strings. But it's my string. And I tied the strings to them, or at least as an adult I have. But it's that combination of nurture and nature, of course.
No, it's a good image, because I'm sitting here just thinking about each of those strands represent a different force in our life, don't they?
100%.
You think about one of them is our desire to please and cooperate with our parents. I mean, that hooks us into a lot. Another strand is the ideas they gave us about who we are and who we should be and stuff. Then culture's got a big strand in it. How culture defines what's acceptable, what's not, in terms of as a person, as behavior. I mean, there's so many influences, which I think it's a really interesting thing, because, one of the big themes this last year, thanks to Tom, has been this real emphasis on looking at emotional sobriety as a practice. Really thinking about this it's an unfolding of a consciousness, right? It doesn't just happen. It's happening, right? It's just an ongoing process that goes on. And some of those strings I wasn't even aware of, even after 4 or 5 decades of recovery, until I started to apply a curiosity, mainly to the things that upset me, and started to try to really unpack what's going on here. But that's to me, that's kind of the good news and the bad news, right? Is you're not going to get this. It's not a one and done deal, right? It's not you're going to get up and hit a home run. You're going to get up and you're going to keep swinging at the ball. Sometimes you're going to get a hit. Sometimes, look, if you bat 300, you're a Hall of Famer in baseball, right? I mean, same for us, right? If we're doing that well, if we just are striving for that progress, there's an amazing amount of things that happen. Well, you know that. You've been coming on Thursday nights. You hear these people sharing what it's meant to them to be exposed to these ideas, and how people are finding a freedom here that they haven't discovered before in the program.
I think one of the things that I had not thought of it in just this way until you just said that, Alan, but in terms of the practice, we had our different ways of doing it, but I used to sell a T-shirt that just says "Practice makes practice," and it's Patrick and I have talked about this before. You don't exercise one time and then say, "Well, good, I'm in good shape now." You don't brush your teeth one time and say, "Well, my teeth are brushed." We do understand the whole essence of practice, because we do it all the time. We bathe, we brush our teeth, we take out the garbage, we do all these things. And it's like, there's nothing different about this. And I think one of the things, because of the staying power of this Thursday night group that you began, as a temporary measure, for those 2 or 3 weeks that we were going to need it when COVID hit. And it became clear, I think, pretty early for all of us that it wasn't going anywhere. But it is a practice. It is a practice. It is a part of my practice to show up for the Thursday meeting, and I'm not perfect at it, but I'm pretty damn good at it. But I think that we demonstrate by doing that, but they also, by coming back, actually get the experience of being involved in this group practice. And it really does not only teach the concept, but it actually is a demonstration. And it's, and I'm in my book called What Love Is, one of my favorite lines in there is just, if love is not demonstrated, then it's not love. And, if recovery is not practiced, it's not recovery.
You're right.
It's just concept.
Can I ask,
go ahead.
when you're working with people, and you encounter resistance to the unfolding, to consciousness, to alignment with reality, have there been any revelations you've had, maybe not even just recently, but over the course of your career, about, where does that resistance come from? How can it be overcome? Because there's great power that comes with doing the practice, but getting somebody there can be an ordeal.
It's a really good question, because I would
Mhm.
say the majority of the problem in recovery is the resistance to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm assuming
Even when we want it. See, this is one of the things, this is one of the things, I don't know if it's new, but it's a new angle I have on it. And Alan, I think I've talked to you about it a little bit, is I have just become so aware of how clear at my age, through this many years of recovery, that how clear I am on what wisdom is. And not that I'm always wise, but what I can recognize wisdom. And there is a wise voice in me that, you know, that speaks, whether that's the radio through which God is speaking, or it's the wisest part of me, I don't know. But here's what I know: the wisest part of me can speak very clearly. He's not nearly as that character is not nearly as verbose as I am. He's very direct, very, very concise. He can tell me something to do that I know is right, and if I do it, I will be better. And then I will resist it. Vehemently, sometimes, heels dug in. It's like, and I can know that I'm doing it, but I still do it.
Yeah, it is fascinating, that process, isn't it? It is. No, it's so true.
the image I use for it. I'm sorry, Alan, did I interrupt you?
No,
No,
I want to know your image.
I do too. But let me just say this. See, I think that there's some things that are worked on perpetually, right? That we're going to have to be.
Yeah.
I like the phrase Herb uses with this, is stay gently pressed up against it with a ton of compassion and understanding and curiosity. If you bring that to that, you know, you can turn some of these things around that were really impediments and causing a lot of trouble in your life. Like, you know, you talked about how early on in your life you were very narcissistic, Herb. That's I mean, you wouldn't even qualify for the diagnosis today. I mean, you might not even be in the DSM. I mean, you got kicked out of the DSM, Herb. Jeez, got thrown out of another bar, right?
Yeah, really.
Psychiatric bar. That's a good one to get thrown out of. But see, I mean, these things change. You know, they used to say if you have a personality disorder, it's never going to change.
Right.
AA has blown up so many of those concepts that psychiatry had, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I have seen people turn their lives around in amazing ways. Because, you know, one of the things I've always said about Bill Wilson, he was a humanist. He had a lot of faith in the human spirit. And I look at that came from William James. I know that he inherited some of that, some from Jung, some from some of the other great minds that he was, you know, studying with and reading from, you know, reading their literature and stuff like that. But, you know, so some of the problems we're going to just be grinding with the rest of our life. There are a few things that can be turned around, you know, and that you're going to be pretty much finished with it, right? There's some stuff that's going to be of that nature, you know, that you're going to be able to take care of that. Like, for example, if you have an amends to make,
right,
that has been on your mind for a long time, and you do a thorough job, you finish your business with that.
yeah.
And when you finish your business, it's done. You move on. There are things you're going to have that are unfinished business that you can finish and move on with. So that's the exciting thing about recovery. It really embraces both, right? The unfinished business and the stuff that's going to be perpetual in our life, that we're going to be constantly grinding with and dealing with. And please don't judge yourself for that. Understand that's part of our nature. Right? When we talk about what our nature is, there's stuff that we can finish and get done with, and there's stuff that's just gonna be with us the rest of our life, but we can have a different relationship with.
Well, and that's the point of step 10, which I consider the tool of emotional sobriety. Bill says in the 12 and 12 in step 10, it's a spiritual axiom. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And he says in step 10 in the big book, basically reinforcing what you just said, he said, watch for resentment and fear and dishonesty and selfishness when they crop up, not if. When they crop up. We will never transcend our humanity. We will have these instincts. Now, The emotional sobriety is about self-regulation, and meditation is about having the consciousness to be able to be empowered to self-regulate. The image that I was going to use was that dimmer switch. When you said, we need to stay gently pressed up against it. It's against the dimmer switch, the knob that allows the light to go up a notch at a time is hardwired to go backwards. That's our human nature.
Yep.
We will disintegrate if, in fact, we're not intentionally, gently pressed up against becoming a better person. The dimmer switch goes up a notch at a time, but it goes down a notch at a time, and it's on a greased axle. So my image is I lean into the dimmer switch, pushing it gently forward so that it doesn't go backwards. And just reminded of a statement by Tebow. He said, Bill got it right. Those first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at depth, but the ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself.
I love that. Yeah.
Isn't that fabulous? Because it just captures this whole thing about emotional sobriety. And that is, I need to deal with my humanity on a regular basis. And I can do that with the best in me that deals with the worst in me, to quote you, of course, right? So there's a wonderful phrase that bantered around in circles of human development and or spirituality, and that is, are we human beings, a question, seeking a spiritual experience, or are we spiritual beings seeking a human experience? And after weeks of discernment and meditation, my answer is yes. We are spiritual beings seeking a human experience and human beings seeking a spiritual experience. One of the medieval philosophers, I think I've quoted this before in one of our workshops, but it's just so funny. It's come to me in this last year, and I studied it 60 years ago, for God's sakes. But one of the medieval philosophers says this in tongue in cheek. He says, "Oh yeah, we're angels that shit."
I like that. Well, listen, we did once, this is the end of the year. We talked about it before. Why don't each of us go around and say what stood out in this past year for us about emotional sobriety? What was kind of what your headliner for the year on emotional sobriety? So Patrick, why don't you start us out?
Well, my girlfriend moved in. My girlfriend of
That's enough said.
3 years, 3 years coming up on 4. And now that I have a witness, more of like a present witness to my life, I'm integrating somebody else into my daily life more intimately, and the ideas I have about myself and who I'm supposed to be are regularly coming to conflict with the way things actually are. And if I can approach that with humility, which I get about 50% of the time, then I learn more about myself and I'm able to stay grounded and come into myself a little bit more. But when I don't approach these differences with humility, things go sideways. And I've had moments that have positively reinforced me and moments that have really gotten me down, but I'm still in it, and I'm feeling really good about the relationship coming into 2023. So I hope I can keep learning and sticking around you guys.
Well, it's not even hope, just to be determined to keep learning, and relationships are mirrors, and you just installed a really huge, beautiful mirror in your life. And she has too. I mean, it goes both ways. You have critters running around your place like I do in my place. So I identify.
Thank you, Tom.
I am on a path now of discipline, of learning about discipline. And where a year ago, I probably just fairly comfortably excused my lack of discipline. And because it's not a strong suit of mine. And I think I didn't take it seriously. And I think I know today that I was on the run from that. And I am not, we're talking today, I am not. I am including some very important specific things about discipline in my daily practice. It's it's kind of good to have a challenge that is, there's nothing, it's not easy at all. And it's like, but I really feel solid about it. And this group, this group of the four of us sitting here now, or four, how many others? There's four of us here.
There's
1, 2,
four.
3, 4. Okay. They're, math I'm not doing well at, by the way, but it's this, and the Thursday group in total has been a part of that. So I thank you all, because it's life is good.
Well, for me, the exposure to emotional sobriety as a focus and as a subject to learn about has been what, I don't know, Alan, we've been doing it for several years now in terms of unpacking the letter, but now it's got much more formalized in terms of a focus on the steps originally in this Thursday meeting, as well as then the focus on the self-esteem issue. And I've become very, very conscious in the workshops that I do that the self-esteem issue is way bigger than I had ever realized it was, in terms of call it so many words for it, but the one word that's stepping out into my vocabulary as the major synonym for all of the words is low self-worth, a lack of personal sense of value and worthiness. And I was never really conscious of it in those words, a sense of lack of worthiness. People don't feel worthy enough to get well, even though they're suffering. There's some mechanism that anyway, I won't go into that. But so that's been really, really helpful. And that's my project for this coming year, is to really embrace and expand my connection to an understanding and a way to articulate it about self-worth and self-esteem. On the other hand, and Alan and I have talked about this, and we'll be doing some work this coming year on principles. I mean, he started with looking at the core values of emotional sobriety. What are the 12 core values? And we've played with that and wordsmithed out some things which are really the principles underlining the values connected to the steps, as well as self-esteem. And this year we're going to actually formally look at principles. We talk about practice these principles in all our affairs, and there's a lot of lists of principles, but there's nothing that's really been hammered out in, I do believe, both from a spiritual discipline and from a psychological discipline that really has a sense of integration and authenticity. And that's my project for this coming year, as the result of seeing that emotional sobriety is about identifying the principles and being in alignment with those principles, and my life will work.
Cool.
Well, that's really great. I'm excited about that project. I just think that's one of the things I love about what we do here, what I do with you, Herb, what we do on Thursday night is, I get so excited and stimulated. The discourse we have, the sharing of knowledge about these things, and the discovery together. What I've really loved about this, Tom, with you too this year, we've discovered so many things together along this journey.
We have.
It's really been something. For me, this year stood out on a more personal basis, and I could kind of probably divide it between personal and professional. But on a personal basis, this year, I've done more work on digging into the grief and what the loss of my father when I was 11 years old meant to me. And, talk about those strings, Herb, that, I thought it, that was like one of those one and done. I grieved that, I moved on, right? Well, hello, from I've been in therapy this year with a very, very capable therapist, and she just keeps my feet pressed to that fire. Every time I talk about something, she brings it back, and I am seeing so much the depth of that experience and how it has just had these ripple effects throughout my life. I get goosebumps about it. I mean, all the way to even choosing to become a psychologist. I mean, one of the experiences I had is that no one ever asked me how I felt about my dad's death. And secretly inside, I said, I don't want anybody to suffer without somebody saying, hey, tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What are you experiencing right now? What's it like for you to be with that pain that you're in? And what was that loss? What did that mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
Wow.
suffered in silence.
That's a great insight.
Isn't it? I mean, I suffered in silence for
Yeah.
and look, that's what I saw my
50
dad.
years.
That's what I saw my dad do, Herb. He was dying over a year and a half with cancer.
Mhm.
Once did he ever talk about the terrible pain that he was going through, not just physical,
Yeah.
but the emotional, spiritual pain of a man who loved his family,
Right.
was going to be exiting
Right.
well before his time.
Right.
So that, on a personal basis, has been, a lot of challenging work. I mean, I've cried more in therapy this year than probably all the times I've cried before. I mean, and so that, on a personal basis, that's meant a lot to me, is to really see the power of these forces in my life, right? And to be aware of them and how they show up.
And Alan, I just want to say to that too, because it's an awareness I just had about this with you, is not only, I love the insight about you become a therapist in at least in part because of your father, but the other piece about that is because I think of this because my father was such a wonderful teacher to me as an anti-role model. It's like, and he was the anti-role model for self-compassion. It's like I say he was the greatest teacher of self-compassion for me, the importance of self-compassion, because he lived and died without it, and he he lived in hatred of himself, and I've determined somewhere in there to never do that. You're that way too, because not only are you going to always be, you want to be sure that somebody asks somebody who's suffering what's going on. Your dad didn't know how to take care of himself. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to express himself. You're not that man. You are absolutely not that man. You are going to take care of yourself as well as you take care of so many others of your colleagues and friends and of your patients. You take care of your family, and you take care of yourself as well. You do not deal yourself out.
I had a little nudging by that. Herb and my sponsor, Tom, I think about 3 years ago, said, look, Alan, you meet and you talk to, 30, 40, sometimes 50 patients in a week, let's say. And where are you taking your stuff? What are you doing with all that? You're right in the trenches with people that are dealing with a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. What are you doing to take care of yourself? And I realized, I'm a phony. I'm telling everybody the importance of taking care of themselves. I wasn't doing it. I practice a program and stuff like that, and I embrace that. But this is a deeper work for me. And so, I needed a little help from my friends to say,
well, but you and I've talked about that in our old workshop. We used to call it, I call it the hypocrisy principle, which is, I say to everybody that's in a training with me, it's like you, on a regular basis, you drive home at night thinking, how am I doing with the things I'm teaching others? And when I tell them, I think I said this the first time when you and I were presenting together. What I tell them is if you answer yourself that you're doing just fine with it, then you better look again, because you're full of shit. We're not always just fine.
It could be a belief, but what are you doing with it? Watch your feet. I believe in therapy. And Herb would say to me, well, are you in therapy? I'd say, all right, I get it. I mean, it's because it's that thing. If I believe it, are you going to go eat a chef's cooking who's not eating?
I remember old guys in AA saying, if you're worried about how long you've been sober, it's whoever got up first in the morning. And it's not always that clear cut, but sometimes it is.
So from a professional basis, and then we'll wrap this up, and it's of course connected to my personal experience, but the real thing that stands out for me this year is curiosity. It's what Herb was saying a minute ago. I really see the importance of curiosity in emotional sobriety. It doesn't take place unless I become interested in myself in a different way, and curious about what's going on, and curious about what can I do to experience a greater degree of freedom, to develop a consciousness that would really lead me, because I realize that that's something I've always wanted. It really was behind my first drink. I drank and I felt free. and it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, but it came with a hell of a price tag.
Mhm.
And now, there's a way to develop this, which also comes with a price tag. Look, what did Bill say? It's a simple program, but a price must be paid. Same thing is true with emotional sobriety. It's going to create a freedom, but it will pay a price. You will pay a price.
Mhm.
You will be more alive than you've ever been. You will feel things more than you've ever felt them. You will show up for your life in a very different way. And I think that that's great and exciting. And I hope that we've helped some of our listeners, to walk that journey a little bit better this year.
Stick with us. We'll be around next year.
Yes, we will. We'll see you in 2023.